Good morning, everyone. We're at the start of day 10 of jury selection. So, thank you for tuning in. This is Dan at Unicorn Riot. I'm your producer for today. We appreciate all your support. Visit us online at unicornriot.ninja if you get a chance. This is our website. The Chauvin Trial link is up at the top of the front page. Thank you very much for joining me, everybody.
The fact that we have cardiac involvement and hypertensive heart disease leads me to question whether there is anything from the May 6, 2019 case that is relevant on the issue, the medical condition, or the mechanism of death, because that seems to be the primary issue. What is the mechanism that caused the cardiac arrest or cardiac arrhythmia, depending on which expert you talk to? Is there any medical evidence that would contribute or be probative as to cause of death? On May 25th, 2020, the date of Mr. Floyd's death, there is a very similar starting situation as on May 6, 2019. That is, an officer approaches him while he is seated in a car. He is at gunpoint. The police have a gun pointed at him. And the May 25th, 2020 was Officer Lane. They both holster their guns at some point, but there is a shocking interaction between the police and Mr. Floyd. Shocking to Mr. Floyd. That is fairly clear. There is also evidence of drug concealment upon being stopped by the police. Basically concealment by ingestion. In other words, that he was eating and otherwise hiding drugs. On the May 25th, there is evidence of that from a white object of some sort being seen in a photograph from a videogram. There is a pill in the backseat of the squad that he was ultimately taken to and through, which has Mr. Floyd's DNA and saliva, both, in the back of Squad 320. Toxicology results showing fentanyl, which is, as we all know, a powerful opiate, and methamphetamine. The defense theory is part of the drug toxicity is what contributed to his death. So how is May 6th, 2019 relevant to that? Well, there are certain things that are not relevant. Mr. Floyd's emotional behavior is not relevant to cause of death once he is pulled out of the squad car. His statements, while they are very similar to what was said on May 25th, don't really establish anything other than perhaps his mental state. And as I think the state correctly notes in its memo from yesterday on page 3, Mr. Floyd's internal motivations on May 25th are immaterial. Whether he was genuinely anxious, claustrophobic, or suffering a panic attack, or whether he was malingering, is of no consequence. He was exhibiting certain behaviors which are evident on both videotapes, both May 6th, 2019 and May 25th, 2020. But they were the behaviors, regardless of their source, regardless of their motivation, whether they were due to anxiety or due to malingering, doesn't matter, because it is the behavior that the officers in both cases were required to deal with. The behavior is remarkably similar in reviewing the tapes. However, that does not make the emotional behavior of Mr. Floyd admissible. Accordingly, that part of May 6, 2019 is not admissible. Generally, what he is saying up until the time he talks to a paramedic is not admissible. Nor the fact that the officers said this was part of a narcotics investigation and they suspected Mr. Floyd of dealing drugs. Not relevant. Not admissible. The only thing that is relevant, again, we have to keep in mind, for cause of death. Any other purpose for which this is offered is not relevant and is unduly prejudicial and outweighs the probative value. But as to the point of cause of death and medical condition, May 6th is relevant. There is a modus operandi to conceal drugs in part by ingesting them, but also doing so in a very stressful circumstance. That is, being pulled out of a car at gunpoint and handcuffed. And so, what is relevant in the May 6, 2019 case that goes to cause of death or medical condition is essentially the video of the body-worn camera would be admissible from the time that the one officer approaches Mr. Floyd on the passenger side of the vehicle, the subsequent behavior with regard to eating drugs or not, his delay in complying. Again, when we get into resisting or complying, I don't think that is of any consequence. It is delaying in compliance, allowing him to ingest drugs, but more importantly, that heightens the stress on everyone, but most importantly on Mr. Floyd. Being pulled out of a car at gunpoint, I am sure, caused him great stress and was a very shocking incident. The only reason we know that this is relevant to cause of death and is probative is that subsequent to taking drugs while being encountered by police, similar to May 25th of 2020, Mr. Floyd was checked out by a paramedic. Everything leading up to that conversation with the paramedic is not admissible beyond that initial video up until the time Mr. Floyd is out of the car. Even the videotape, the body-worn camera, which I think was actually just placed on a table, of the paramedic's conversation with Mr. Floyd is also not admissible because it does contain some of the emotional behavior, which is not admissible. But the paramedic can testify as to that this person was called to the scene to examine Mr. Floyd, to treat Mr. Floyd, and in doing so, he made certain statements which would be admissible as statements made for the purpose of medical diagnosis, specifically how much drugs, what kind of drugs, and the timing of the drugs, when the drugs were taken. Those could be hearsay, but it does fall within the statements for purposes of medical diagnosis. The other statements of Mr. Floyd are not admissible. The examination then discovered, and I don't have the exact numbers, and I didn't have the, I apologize, I don't have the timestamps or the exact, because I reviewed this last week. But it's my understanding that the blood pressure that was found was 216 over 162, or something in that neighborhood. It was over 200 for the systolic and over 160 for the diastolic. And I hope I got those right. But in any case, that's more than just a history of hypertension. It is clear from other records that Mr. Floyd had a history of hypertension. But what this shows, this blood pressure, is that he is now in a hypertensive emergency, such that the paramedic said, you have to go to the hospital because you could have a heart attack or stroke. That statement by the paramedic is not admissible. The reason for that is, as the state said, notice to Mr. Floyd that is not relevant. There's no really reason why he has to be told that. On the other hand, the paramedic can explain her actions in recommending to Mr. Floyd to go to the hospital because I'm sure her training is a blood pressure that high means someone is in a hypertensive emergency, and hypertensive emergency with a blood pressure that high can cause cardiovascular, cardiopulmonary complications. So the paramedic can testify as to why she recommended to Mr. Floyd to go down to the hospital. That does not mean that her video statements to him are admissible. I think it makes more sense for her to explain why she took the action she did. The subsequent treatment at the hospital, and the defense noted that Mr. Floyd was violent or otherwise, none of that is admissible. So what we have here, what I'm going to allow, is a portion of the videotape of the one officer from the time he approaches the car until Mr. Floyd is out of the car and handcuffed. And I apologize, I don't have a timestamp, but it's very clear that there's a shot of the back of his shirt. He's wearing a black shirt. At that point, he's been handcuffed. That's all that would be admissible. The pills that are in the crack of the seat would also, there's a photograph of that would be admissible also as part of that scenario. And then the blood pressure and Mr. Floyd's statements regarding that were made for purpose of that medical diagnosis. The whole point here is we have medical evidence on what happens when Mr. Floyd is faced with virtually the same situation. Confrontation by police at gunpoint, followed by a rapid ingestion of some drugs. We don't know exactly how many, but there was an admission that he had done it at the time of the stop. That is medical evidence. So we don't have the benefit of on-the-scene medical vital signs on May 25th. So the May 6th, 2019 case is relevant only to that extent. Mr. Floyd's emotional behavior, calling out for his mother, all that is not admissible because the emotional behavior in his state of mind is not relevant. The May 6, 2019 evidence is only admissible for the limited purpose of showing what Mr. Floyd's, as an example of Mr. Floyd's bodily reaction, his physical symptoms upon being confronted in almost the exact same situation. Now, how does this affect the decision on Dr. Vincent's testimony? Dr. Vincent's report and her testimony would be strictly psychiatric evidence going to the state of mind of George Floyd. As I've said, this is not admissible. It's not by either side. The behavior itself is manifest on the videotape. And I believe the state has one expert who would say, the behavior you see on the videotape is not consistent with a cardiac arrhythmia. Perfectly appropriate opinion based on what they see on the videotape. To go further and say, have a psychiatrist say, this is due to or just consistent with anxiety, hypertension, or not hypertension, anxiety, claustrophobia, panic attack, really is just opining on the state of mind of Mr. Floyd and the mechanism or why he's acting the way he is. If the defense were to attempt to say that he's simply malingering, that would be speculation, and I would not allow that either. Because Dr. Vincent's testimony would go to the state of mind and interpreting the emotional behavior and its cause, that is anxiety, panic attack, claustrophobia, or even PTSD, is not admissible. Having said that, if the state believes that there is something the defense has done to open the door, we can discuss off the record or at least outside the hearing of the jury if the defense has opened the door to Dr. Vincent's testimony. Keep in mind that would be in rebuttal. Keep in mind further that if I allow Dr. Vincent's testimony, then the entirety of the May 6th case would be in, because the defense would have a right to confront her opinion by playing the entire videotape of Mr. Floyd's emotional reaction on May 6th. And I think this illustrates both the benefit of motions in limine and the disadvantage of motions in limine. Number one, the benefit is we can try and parse through a lot of these very detailed evidentiary issues before trial so that we are not taking long recesses to discuss and brief while the jury is waiting. And so this is absolutely appropriate that this was dealt with by motion in limine. The disadvantage is we cannot, to every extent, script out this trial. Trials happen in real time, and there is just the true nature of it that things change. So accordingly, let's go with that idea, is that if the state feels that the door has been open, we'll have a conference about that and I'll decide. But keeping in mind that if it is open, it's probably open to all the evidence regarding Mr. Floyd's emotional behavior and its evaluation. So that is the court's ruling. We're going to try and get as much of this down into a written memorandum over the weekend. Mr. Schaefer and I will be putting in some time to firm this up. But that is the limits that the court will allow. I think this is consistent with the Ness case, which said that it can only be for a limited purpose, and the amount of evidence regarding that limited purpose has to be limited as well to try and keep out as much prejudicial matter as possible. Now, as to the motions for continuance and for change of venue. The purpose of a change of venue is to ensure that the defendant has a fair trial by an impartial jury. The same is true as the basis for the defense's latest motion to continue, with the hope that as time passes, people forget some of the pretrial publicity. Unfortunately, I think the pretrial publicity in this case will continue no matter how long we continue it. Perhaps some of it may, with time, be forgotten by people. And as far as change of venue, I do not think that that would give the defendant any kind of a fair trial beyond what we are doing here today. I don't think there's any place in the state of Minnesota that has not been subjected to extreme amounts of publicity on this case. Change of venue is an option in the rule when there is extensive pretrial publicity that is prejudicial, And there was prejudicial pretrial publicity, including the latest actions by the city of Minneapolis in settling the case. I'm not questioning whether they could or should settle the case at this time, but the bottom line is when it's reported by the press, it can affect the jury, it can prejudice or taint our jury pool. I'll be very honest, when that was first brought up by the defense, I thought they were overstating. I thought this really won't have an effect. People know it's a different case, different situation. I was a little shocked when we called back the 9 jurors who had been seated, and 2 said it did move them off of being fair and impartial. We had all accepted them as fair and impartial jurors. 2 of them basically said that they could not be fair and impartial any longer. I was surprised that it had such an effect. That's probably a judicial bias. As a judge, I'm used to, okay, that's not relevant, so I'm just going to put it aside. So it is easy for me as a judge to disregard the fact that the city settled, knowing that it's totally different factors. But I have to remember that that's not the point of view that jurors are coming from. And so 2 said that they could no longer be fair and impartial. They were stricken. That left us 7. It is important to note that the other 7 did not feel that it was going to change their ability to be fair and impartial. Ultimately, on a motion to continue to ameliorate prejudicial pretrial publicity and continuance or change of venue for those purposes, is to find a fair and impartial jury. We have had 8 full days of voir dire from March 9th through March 18th, and now we're going to continue, hopefully, to select 2 more jurors. We had an initial jury pool of 326 from the random draw on February 1st based on all the summons jurors who returned questionnaires. We have gone through 95 panel members as of March 18th. 57 have actually been questioned. 22 were excused for cause on the parties' joint motion based on the review of the questionnaires. 16 were excused from the panel by the jury office between February 1st and March 18th after having completed questionnaires due to postponements, ineligibility criteria, for example, no longer resident of Hennepin County, non-citizen, over the age of 70, health-related, etc., but prior to questioning. Of those 57 panel members whom we have actually questioned during the 8 days of voir dire, we have selected 12. Defense has exercised 12 peremptories. The state has exercised 6. And the court excused 27 for cause after individual questioning. I think it's worthy to note that I did give both sides extra peremptories. And people may wonder, how does that help? If I'm not going to change venue and I'm not going to continue the trial. There are jurors who are very clearly incapable of being fair and impartial. Some will come right out and admit it. Those are the easy ones. The court can excuse those when they say, for whatever reason, I cannot be fair and impartial. The next set are those who the court makes a finding that based on the totality of the circumstances cannot be fair and impartial. As I've said a few times during voir dire, just saying the magic words, they can be fair and impartial, does not end the court's inquiry. The court has to consider the totality of circumstances and decide if it has been established that they cannot be fair and impartial. There's a third class of jurors who don't say enough to establish a challenge for cause. Yet there are concerns that they still might harbor certain biases, and maybe it's rarely that they are lying to the court or to the parties. It's usually that they just have not done sufficient introspection, to be honest, and see how their biases affect them. It is for that reason that a peremptory challenge can be made if the parties believe that a person cannot be fair and impartial, that they would be biased against their client, be it the state of Minnesota or the defendant. That's the purpose of peremptory challenges. More were given after the settlement announcement because that would add an added layer of potential prejudicial pretrial publicity. And so to get at that third group, which might have grown in size because of their exposure to the settlement, That's the purpose of giving both sides additional peremptory challenges, to focus on that third group, which, although they heard about the settlement, said they could be fair and impartial, but we all, or some, the striking party, had concerns that they could in fact be fair and impartial. And that's an appropriate exercise of peremptory challenges. Obviously, challenges based on race or gender, and that being the reason for the strike, are improper, and we've dealt with those on the various challenges that have been brought. With that, we'll continue with jury selection. We will continue with jury selection in this case and in this county. Accordingly, we'll take a break till 9 o'clock when our first juror is here. So we'll stand in recess until that time. Thank you.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Thanks for tuning in. This is Dan at Unicorn Riot. We're live today on YouTube, on twitch.tv/unicorn_riot, on Facebook, and on Periscope. So, Unicorn Riot's a nonprofit media organization. We cover social issues. You can check out our website at unicornriot.ninja to find out more about what the kind of stuff that we report on. So, I just was showing a quick view of the folks that are around in the trial. So Peter Cahill is the judge, Eric Nelson's the lead defense attorney, Amy Voss is his assistant who sits behind him, Keith Ellison is on the case, Matthew Frank, Neil Katyal, Stephen Schlechter, Jerry Blackwell, Joshua Larson, Aaron Eldridge, Christina Marinkaki, and Sundeep Iyer are representing the state of Minnesota. And there are, I think they said, about 12 different attorneys, so there are a few that aren't on this list that are technically involved. So it's, it's a pretty huge trial. There's been a lot of players coming and going. So we just heard some rulings on some motions, and they aren't available in writing, but clearly there will not be a venue change. It will stay here in Hennepin County. The judge agreed that the publicity has happened. Everybody knows the trial's happening. It won't help to move it. And there's been a little confusion, but the video they were talking about was a 2019 arrest, and then in some limited way the defense can try to use that to make arguments about Floyd, and some of that will be allowed. That was the video they were talking about. They were not talking about a 2020 video. I just wanted to clarify that because it seemed like people were confused about what was going on. So there'll be something from 2019 allowed. And there'll be no continuance, which means the trial won't be delayed, which means it's going to keep happening. There can only be described as political pressure to get this thing done, because downtown Minneapolis is set up like a fortress right now. A lot of workplaces are shut down, so it's a tense situation for the whole city right now. And as we've been seeing this week, the mayor and the police chief are moving towards trying to get control of George Floyd Square. That's been going on in press conferences. Not a good situation, most likely. So we will be following these developments as they continue, but it definitely seems like there's a lot at stake right now in the city. I just wanted to mention that quickly. So again, we thank you for all your support. If you hit the Chauvin landing page here, it'll have on our website, it'll have the latest updates that we drop and things going on. We have a story about the Black Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter, and the jury questionnaire, so we're going to hear about more of that. There's going to be at least two alternates have to be found for the trial as well. They do have the 12 jurors, but they need the 2 alternates, is my understanding at the moment. So thank you all for your support. We're going to run, as we're waiting for 13 minutes here, we're going to run some earlier videos sort of taking a look at what happened in George Floyd Square, taking a look back, taking a look at some of the context that gets easily kind of disregarded a lot of the time. So we really appreciate your support. If you can go to our website, unicornriot.ninja, and then up in the main menu there's a donate link, and we can take donations in a number of different ways, including on Patreon, and your support really makes this possible. We've put in a lot of effort to not just create the video streams, but also to have people reporting and trying to figure out what's going on, to track what's going down. There is an option to actually donate with a debit card. Someone's asking right now. We do have that option, and if that's not working, please contact us at info@unicornriot.ninja, but it should be an option. So thank you, the chatter who mentioned that. It should be working right now. So we're gonna run this video, and we really appreciate your support today. Thanks, everyone.
There's a community that exists, and even if the police were to roll over this place, the people will come right back, and the barricades will come right back up, and they're not going to be able to quash this space.
No justice!
No streets!
No justice!
No streets!
No justice!
No streets!
Let me tell you that the city killed a man. Yes. And that is why we are here. That is why the community is standing for justice and asking and demanding for justice.
This street does not belong to you anymore, City of Minneapolis. You're going to have to negotiate. You're going to have to give us some justice if you want that street back.
After George Floyd was murdered, the barricades went up and the demand went out. And those demands, the justice resolution, has played a very, very key role in establishing this as a space of protest and establishing this as an autonomous zone. That's been the reason the barricades stay up.
It's for holding the police accountable, it's for demanding justice, and it's also demanding structural changes and investments into the community.
It isn't any one individual demand, it is a collection of needs and wants from this community saying, these are the things that we need in order to move forward to heal. And it's just talking about the beginning steps. And so we're talking about merely $155 million over the course of 10 years, which is really not a huge amount of money when we're talking about the oppression and the systematic racism that has kept this community down from the beginning.
But we understand that this is not the beginning, neither is this the end to justice. Play your role. We're not asking you, we're demanding, play your role. Bring the resources. We have the healers, we have the teachers. Quit pimping us. Quit prostituting us. Expecting us to run into a burning building with a water gun. Give us the resources so that we can now heal our own land with our own bodies. People who look like us, sound like us, move like us, and think like us.
What can change, or what can be different, or what can be better, or what can happen where we're okay to opening up the streets if we say no justice, no street. And yeah, the 20 to 4 demands is here, but that's just a scratch on the surface, because that doesn't really say Black liberation.
GFS has utilized a partial demand very, very well to prop up the space, and it's a partial demand in the sense that it's not necessarily demanding the complete collapse of the world capitalist system. We say that we hold the space until the demands are met, and the city certainly does not want to meet the demands, and so they won't take back the space. So we're in a sort of crossfire.
They're going to have to meet those demands before we give up 38th Street. We're not giving it up. 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 We're not giving it up.
one of the big things about how things are defeated beforehand, it's when you don't develop processes and systems that can continue to keep themselves up. At GFS, every day there's a meeting in the morning and a meeting in the night. And that has been one of the ways that like community has really, really developed. And like you look around here, you see like bus stops turned into storage, bus stops turned into a people's closet. You see bookshelves going up. You see we've got a medical shed. We've got a greenhouse.
We've got a library. 612 MASH is a medic organization that operates out of the square. And there's this People's Way. This is a public space, you know, it's a public meeting space, and it's a public space of a real like community and joy and unity. And it's a sacred space, you know, and it's a space of grieving and also of liberation. And so for people who are coming in here, you know, people come from all over. It's almost a pilgrimage site in that way. I think it's something really to be said about how the common spaces and collectively maintained spaces have been like eroded by capitalism. You can see this as a return of the commons in a lot of ways.
In the ruins of capitalism, we've built something new, and something that sort of leaders in the square, Marsha especially, has said before. This is a blueprint for how society can be, you know, how society can be organized, how we can develop community and come here together and meet the needs of the community. Because every day there are people who are unhoused who will come here sort of to find sanctuary. They'll come here and they'll get fed, they'll get clothed, and they'll get resources to get housed. And that's a thing that literally the state has been unable to provide. And the fact that community has been able to come in and fulfill that role it spells out exactly why this is the way of the future and not the way of the state.
It looks like many things at many times a day if you've been in this square. Yeah. But in all those hours of every day, it still looks like community. It's community.
I'm out here with my passion. I'm out here for my feelings, or because somebody else told me to, or somebody had to convince me to be out here, or somebody to convince for me to stay out here every day. No, I made up my mind when it all happened, and this is home. Like, look, this is home. I done ran down these streets.
In my first meeting that I came with a close friend of mine, I was instantly sold, because how they embrace black people, especially the black man in this community, I mean, it's beautiful. I've never had a chance to experience this much black love in the area. No hatred, no undercutting. They just want to see the success of a black man here, and that's pretty much what brought me here.
What made me start was at the uprising, the space was filled with hundreds and hundreds of people. So I came out during the evenings, about 5-ish, and stayed till like maybe 6 a.m. or something like that. I barbecued right on the street every night at 9:45, especially when they broke out the curfew. When they broke out the curfew, that we had to be in the house at about 10 p.m., or we're gonna get a citation and blah, 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 blah. I'm like, we ain't going home. Spark grills at 9:45, and barbecued until I ran out of food. Costly, very, very costly, because barbecue is not cheap whatsoever, but it kept the square fed at the time. Food makes people happy. Food brings people together. I didn't think I was gonna come out here and be feeding people for 6 months. No. No. I don't get paid for what I do. That's just out the genuine of my heart. Just like we needed to secure the space and make sure it needed to be secured. Until we find out exactly who's gonna do that all day, every day, I'll take some of my time.
If you're stationed on a barricade, it's keeping an eye out for the police.
We're gonna hold this down. They got an army, we got our own army. It don't matter. They want to call this the United States. It's not the United States. We're not with the system. We are showing them how united we can actually be. So as of that, we're gonna be careful and be aware. And to be aware is to be alive. So be careful out here in every state, for real, and be well protected. And that's all I gotta say. Now I'm gonna have to watch out for everybody.
And it's, opening and closing for residents coming in and out. At certain barricades have like gates that we open and close so people can still get in and out of the space to their homes. We're not trying to inconvenience anybody. We have masks, bottled water, snacks, basic resources like this that we'll pass out to people and we'll greet people coming into the space. I think like the sort of first importance of this space is as a memorial, as a sacred space for grieving, a black man who was murdered by the state. And I think it's also grown into a really powerful autonomous community of mutual aid, and really not just envisioning but enacting a community that is as free as we can be from policing and from the United States as a settler colonial fascist government.
GFS it's kind of the epicenter of an uprising, right? And it's been operating very well as a staging ground for other types of struggles that are ongoing in the area, whether that be stuff for Line 3, whether that be stuff in the housing movement, all types of racial justice movements. It's been sort of a center for activists all across the city.
There's many memorials in this space. The biggest ones are for George Floyd, but there's also the Street of Names and Say Their Names Cemetery, which are both really moving, large-scale testaments to the memories of lives stolen by the police. And there's also plenty of individual memorials. Murphy Ranks' memorial is down the street there. And honestly, there's so many that really shows the power of this space to hold testament to so many, as well as to George Floyd, first and foremost.
Because it ain't like we ain't got homes to go to. It ain't like we ain't got lives outside of the square, because we do. We're just learning how to maintain and juggle what life is and what the square is. Love you, babe.
No justice, no streets. If they want these streets, they got to get into these demands. We got solidarity, y'all. We here. They want a little bit of street. They got to give us a little bit of justice.
Interesting about this whole vordering of the jury is that it becomes more and more obvious that what's really going on is that it's going to be difficult to sit or seat honest people. Black people are not going to be able to get on this jury, not honest black people, because the juror who was rejected today, the only black woman that's been there, said, look, I can't unsee what I saw, right? And so what the system is trying to do is get you to accept. So it's going to be difficult, I think, to convict this guy, because the system has its own set of rules. And if you play by their set of rules, it may be that Derek Chauvin is innocent. As crazy as it may sound, by the system rule. And so I've noticed when they were talking to the jurors, what the lawyers are pretty much saying is that, hey, if the conclusion that you arise, if it violates your sense of morality, are you willing to do that? If it violates your values, are you willing to do that? And in order to be on a jury, you have to say yes. It's a tough deal. So this is paradoxical. On the one hand, yes, everybody should have their day in court. I totally agree with that. But on the other hand, it's really going to be difficult to seat a fair jury in a community that's already been properly. I'm going to write this piece. It's going to be difficult to find a fair jury in a rigged population. Yes, because a lot of the people who are going to qualify for, or they're going to think qualify, are folks who have a certain perspective, right, that allows them to see things from the perspective of the police. It's a tough deal. You've got to lay down your values and your sense of morality and say, okay, I accept these parameters. And that's kind of shaky.
All right, this is juror 96. Come on up and have a seat right here next to me. And you are juror number 96, correct?
Correct.
All right. A couple things before I turn things over to the attorneys. And first of all, sorry we had to make you come back after yesterday. We try our best to calibrate how many we can get to in a day, but sometimes things are not perfect.
It's not a problem.
Okay. First of all, I'm going to swear you in because all your answers have to be under oath. So if you'd raise your right hand, do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully answer all questions about your qualifications to serve as a juror?
I do.
All right, thank you. Also, we have plexiglass in front of you, between us, plexiglass in front of the attorneys when they ask you questions. I'll continue to keep my mask on. My point being, if you want to remove your mask at any time, feel free to do so. Either because it's more comfortable or to speak more clearly if you think it's necessary. You can take it off at any time. You can also put it back on at any time or just leave it on. Your choice, basically.
Okay.
All right? But in either case, mask or no mask, I'd ask that you pull a little bit, and I think you're there, so that we can hear you nice and clearly. Well, first of all, thank you for filling out the questionnaire. Gave us a lot of good information to start with. And is everything true on that questionnaire?
It is.
Okay. Any changes or additions to that questionnaire?
No.
Okay. And the reason I ask that is because it's been a couple months, and sometimes people, when they reflect on their questionnaire, think, yeah, I probably should have put this down, or something I put down was inaccurate, or maybe even an opinion I expressed has evolved. The bottom line being, feel free and comfortable giving a different answer than what's in the questionnaire.
Okay.
All right? You'll find it comes up mostly, the attorneys will ask you specific questions about your questionnaire, and usually what they will do is read it, the question, and your answer, not to be confrontational, but just to refresh your memory as to what you said.
Okay.
All right. Now, the questionnaire also advised you not to read any articles to avoid the media about this case, but we understand that given the large amount of publicity on this case, that inadvertently you might have been exposed to a headline or a news blurb since you filled out the questionnaire today. Do you recall being exposed to anything specifically?
Yes.
Okay, and what in specific?
The settlement.
Okay, and what details do you remember about the settlement?
It was just one of those ticker things that go across the bottom of a screen on the TV.
The hardest thing to avoid.
Yes.
Okay. How do you think that's going to affect you as being a juror in, it's a different case, but how do you think it'll affect you as a juror in this case?
I don't think it will.
Okay. Do you understand that that's a separate case, civil case, different parties, different legal issues, different laws that apply?
I do.
All right. On a more general, well, let me ask, any other things that you've heard of in the meantime?
I have not.
Okay. Can you put aside, because you did know something about this case, as everybody who's answered the questionnaire knows something, can you put aside everything you've heard outside this courtroom?
I can.
Okay. Because you have to decide it just on the evidence that you hear in court based on the law that I give you. Can you do that?
I can.
Okay. Put aside everything you've heard, but also any opinions you might hold coming into this case.
Yes.
And as you sit here right now, do you feel that you continue to be a fair and impartial juror?
I do.
All right. I'm just looking at part 1, number 10. We asked that specific question, and you said yes, so I just want to see if that had changed.
Yes.
All right. Do you think you're pretty much, despite being exposed to something about the settlement, you continue to be as impartial as before?
I do.
All right. Did you recognize any witnesses on the list you were given?
I did not.
Okay. Now, we anticipate that the trial is going to be about 4 weeks long, starting on March 29th. And we're pretty confident in that date, so it's, I'm sure, not going to be changed. We're not going to move it up either. So, does that work for you as far as timing?
It does.
Yeah, I think you mentioned something in your questionnaire. If you could tell us what concerns you might have about either the timing or just being on the trial in general.
It's just my father's having a hip surgery at that time.
Okay.
So we're just trying to coordinate between my siblings, family members, and maybe different care facilities how to care for him after the fact.
Okay. Do you think that the rest of your family can cover for it? And
I do.
Okay. You also indicated some nervousness about the verdict. I'm going to leave that to the attorneys to talk to you about.
Yes.
But is there anything else that you think we should know before I turn you over to the attorneys?
Yes, I'm requesting some privacy regarding a question on the questionnaire.
I think I marked one myself for that. Yes. And I think that's appropriate.
Okay.
So I will grant you that privacy.
Thank you.
Basically, when we go, we call it an in-camera examination, which is an unfortunate, because most people think that means you're on camera, but it's not. Just the Latin term for more of a private conversation.
Yes.
Your audio will be turned off, so it'll just be us in the courtroom who can hear your audio. The reporters have promised, that are present in the courtroom, have promised not to report out any of the substance of what you're talking about, as if they were not in the courtroom at the time you talked about it. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
All right, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Nelson as to juror number 96. Mr. Nelson, you may inquire.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
Thank you for being here, and again, thank you for your patience yesterday. I would like to ask you, start with some kind of general questions, get to know you a little bit better, and then I'll follow up with some specific questions about your responses on the questionnaire, if that's okay.
Okay.
All right. So, ma'am, let's assume you and I were to meet under much different circumstances, a party or some sort of social or networking event, whatever it may be, and you and I have our first conversation. What are a couple of things that I learn about you during that casual conversation?
I would let you know that I'm an animal lover, specifically dogs. I have a passion for homeless and affordable housing. I would like to get more involved in that area. In Minnesota, I feel like there's a great need for that.
Okay.
I like to take long walks through nature, kind of decompress and relax during that time.
Sure. Okay. Wonderful. You'd obviously heard about this case before filling out this questionnaire, right?
I have.
And when you received the jury summons and you learned that you were a potential juror in this case, what was your initial reaction?
Go big or go home. It's kind of overwhelming. I know it's a high-profile case.
Sure.
So, a little concerning.
Sure. And I think you noted in your questionnaire that you had some concerns about the verdict and the kind of consequences of a verdict.
I did.
Do you still have those concerns?
A little bit.
Okay. Well, let me ask you, when you got down to the government center yesterday and you kind of saw the fortifications and things of that nature, did it make you feel any safer?
It feels safe.
Okay. And when you heard yesterday that we're doing whatever we can to kind of protect your anonymity, did that make you feel better?
It's very reassuring.
Okay. And ultimately, at some point, however, your name may be released publicly as a juror in this case, but that wouldn't happen until the court deems it safe to do so. How does that make you feel?
I'm okay with that.
Okay, good. Let me ask you, in terms of your, your concerns, right? There's two possible outcomes, guilty or not guilty. Do you think that your safety would be in jeopardy if one verdict was rendered over the other?
I do not.
You do not?
I do not.
Okay. So your concerns are sort of broad regardless of the verdict?
Correct.
Okay. And your concerns would not sway you or influence you to vote one way versus the other?
They would not.
Okay, fair enough. In your personal or professional life, can you think of a time when you've been called upon to resolve a conflict between two people?
Professionally, yes.
I'm sorry?
Professionally, yes.
Okay. And when you're kind of involved in that situation, how do you approach that? What tools do you bring to the analysis to resolve conflict?
So regarding the profession that I'm in, I would go to one of our staff members, ask them what the situation was, go to our customer, listen to what they have to say, and then I would apply our company policies to resolve the situation.
Okay. Now, obviously, this case involves questions of conflict, and that those conflicts may emerge in various levels. There's the broader conflict, which is the state of Minnesota versus Derek Chauvin, and that's ultimately what you would be tasked with resolving. But in the jury room, you know, you've got 12 jurors. You're one of 12 people who have to ultimately decide this case. And conflict may emerge amongst the jurors. Could you foresee that happening?
I could.
All right. And it may be in various forms, right? It may be over certain pieces of evidence. It may be interpersonal conflicts. People just don't get along. We don't know because we're not going to be there with you. But generally speaking, let's assume that in the jury room there's conflict between how to interpret evidence or various, you know, a single piece of evidence or various pieces of evidence, and you have two groups, and you haven't made up your mind yet, right? And you are looking at these two groups and the conflict over how to interpret that evidence. How do you approach that situation in those circumstances?
I would allow the courtesy of both sides to reply, to give their opinions, maybe back up the facts how they see it. If it's getting out of control, I feel like I am good at de-escalation things, and just try to have both sides come together for a resolution.
Okay. Do you think it changes the analysis if you're involved in the conflict, meaning you've already made up your mind and you're on one side and there's a group on the other? How do you think it changes if you are a part of the conflict as opposed to observing the conflict?
I would like the opportunity to give my opinion and my side of things. I'm also willing to listen to their point of view and together come to a resolution.
Okay. And do you think that you're the type of person who's going to simply agree with another person just to get it over with or to build consensus?
I do not.
Okay. So you'd be willing to kind of stand your ground if you think something is important?
Correct.
Okay. Again, whether it be in your personal or professional life, have you encountered a situation where you've been asked or trying to figure out if someone is lying about something?
If somebody what?
Is lying about something?
Yes.
Okay. How do you kind of process that? How do you analyze and try to determine if someone is lying to you?
Maybe re-examine the situation, ask more questions, see if the answers are consistently the same or if they would change.
Okay. Do you think that two people can observe a situation, observe it differently, and both be telling the truth, even though their stories may be different?
I do. I feel like people have two different points of view on the same situation.
Right. What types of things may impact someone's perception of events?
What they feel happened, or what they saw, might not always be the full case of it.
Do you think that people's past experiences impact how they perceive events as they occur?
They may.
Okay. Do you think people's training or education or professional experience impact how they may perceive an event?
Sometimes I feel like it could.
Okay. Do you take that into consideration when determining someone's past experiences or their training to determine whether they're going to be more truthful about something?
Possibly.
Okay. Can you think of a situation in your life where you were 100% certain that something happened or 100% certain of some fact, only later to be shown that you were wrong?
I have.
Okay. And how do you deal with that when you've been proven wrong, so to speak?
I like to take a step back, re-examine the situation, admit that I was at fault. I would go to that person and apologize. Okay. I have no problem admitting my faults.
Okay. Now, ultimately, your job, as you understand, is as a juror, is to hear the evidence that's presented in court. Can you base your decision exclusively on the evidence as it's presented in court?
I can.
Regardless of what you may have heard or believed about this situation before court?
Yes.
Okay. And ultimately, at the end of the case, the judge will give you the law, right? You're the judge of the facts, the judge is the judge of the law. The judge will tell you what law applies in this case. And you may read that law and you may go, I disagree. I think this law is wrong, whether it's from a moral standpoint or you just think the judge messed it up. Can you apply the law as the judge gives it to you, even if you think it's wrong or should be changed?
I can.
Great. So I want to follow up. Thank you very much for your responses, ma'am. I want to follow up with some questions that I have on your questionnaire. You were asked a series of questions, or there's a series of references to a video. And I want to make sure what video we're talking about, because several have been released publicly. There is one video that was a bystander took a video of the arrest of Mr. Floyd. That video sort of went viral and became news, right? And then there were body camera footage from the officers that were released, as well as some surveillance and security cameras from there.
A standard video.
Okay. Now, and when you say in your questionnaire, I think you say you've seen it 2 or 3 times. There's what we would refer to as kind of a longer video, a full-length video, and then the media has taken clips from that video and put it on the news. Have you gone and watched the full-length video?
Just the short version on the news.
Okay. So your exposure to the video has been only what you've seen in the media in various length of clips?
Correct.
Okay. And you were then asked to kind of detail and document what you knew about the case, or what you believed to be about the information you had about the case, let's say that. And you wrote a paragraph, talking about Mr. Floyd using a counterfeit bill. The police were called. Police ultimately respond. And then you wrote, several bystanders expressed their concerns, asking officers to get off him, and when officers continued their restraints, they began videotaping the incident. And you wrote, this restraint ultimately was responsible for Mr. Floyd's demise. Is that something that you have information about? How have you concluded that the restraint is what was the cause of Mr. Floyd's death?
I guess I assumed it was the cause. Okay. It's not based on anything else other than the video.
Okay. So you watched the video and you made some assumptions about that restraint and the use of that restraint, and ultimately we know that Mr. Floyd is deceased, and so you just kind of 1 + 1 = 2 analysis, or was your opinion influenced by what you heard in the media?
No, it's just my opinion based on the video.
Okay. If you were to hear, ultimately, one of the things the state has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt is what was the cause of Mr. Floyd's death. And you're going to, in all likelihood, hear differing medical testimony about what the cause of death was. Can you set aside your assumptions or opinions that you had formed beforehand, apply the presumption of innocence, listen to the evidence, and make a decision based on the evidence as it's presented in court?
I can, because I feel like the video may not show the entirety of the situation of what happened. It's a snippet of what happened. I don't know what happened before, and I don't really know what happened after.
Okay, fair enough. Now, I know when you filled out this questionnaire, there were questions as it pertains to all four officers that were involved in this situation, and we're only here today for Mr. Chauvin's trial. So there's a little bit of a difference in your response. I wanted to ask you. You were asked to state your general impression of the defendants generally. You wrote other, or you checked the box other, and you wrote, I have different impressions for each individual defendant. I do not view them all the same. So can you just explain what you meant by that, only as it pertains to Mr. Chauvin? How would you view Mr. Chauvin in relation to the others?
I feel like he took a different role in the situation versus the other officers.
How do you mean?
More like the leader.
Okay. And do you assign him more blame as a result of that role?
I do not.
You do not?
I do not.
Okay. You just view that he was perhaps a superior or senior officer on the scene, and that's it?
Yes.
Versus other officers who may have been newer to the force, younger, less experienced?
Correct.
And that opinion of Mr. Chauvin, would you describe just your opinion of Mr. Chauvin if you were to say very negative, somewhat negative, neutral, somewhat positive, or very positive? What would it be?
Since I don't know him, I would base it off the video that I saw, and I would say somewhat negative.
Okay, and that's fair. Again, everyone's entitled to their opinions, and we're just trying to see if you're the right juror for this case. So in that regard, if it's somewhat negative, again, can you set that opinion aside, apply the presumption of innocence, and decide the case based on the evidence in trial?
I could.
You were asked your general impression of Mr. Floyd, and you checked the neutral box, and you wrote, I do not judge people because I do not know their circumstances, background, or upbringing. Why do you think that background or upbringing may be relevant to your analysis of Mr. Floyd?
I just know that people can form certain opinions based on media or whatever they heard. I don't know him, so therefore I would not base an opinion about him until I actually met him or knew him.
Okay. And whether you do or don't hear any information about his circumstances, background, or upbringing, again, can you judge this case in a fair and impartial manner?
I could.
Okay. You were asked if you had ever talked about George Floyd's death with family, friends, or coworkers, or discussed it online, for example, on social media. You checked the box yes. Let me parse that out. Have you ever expressed an opinion on social media relevant to this case?
I do not use social media.
Fair enough. But in terms of your conversations with friends, family, or coworkers, you wrote that you expressed sadness that a person's life was lost over a counterfeit $20 bill and that it should have happened differently. Can you explain that a little bit more?
I don't know if the allegations were ever proved that it was a counterfeit $20 bill. I was hoping that that wasn't the case. Like I said, I don't know what happened prior, if there was some type of altercation or not that caused the end result or not.
Okay. Now, I guess I'm curious about your statement that it should have happened differently. What do you mean by that?
I guess because I wasn't there, and I feel like videos only show a certain portion of the incident. Maybe there could have been a different outcome.
Okay. So, I mean, it's fair to say that you're not a police officer, right?
Correct.
And I'm not trying to be glib, obviously. And one of the subjects that may be of contest or conflict in this trial process of police training, the use of force, things of that nature. If you were, are you open to the?
I am.
You were asked if you believe your community was negatively or positively affected by any of the protests that have taken place in the Twin Cities after Mr. Floyd's death, and you checked, or you wrote, positively if protests are peacefully done. Can you just explain, what do you mean by peacefully done? What do you mean by protests?
I feel like everybody has a right to protest. I feel it's a way to get the word out, attention to issues that people are concerned about, and I think it, it has a positive impact in our insight and for our society.
Okay, good. There were a series of these kind of broad statements, and you were asked to rank your opinion on these statements from strongly agree to strongly disagree. Do you remember that exercise generally?
I do. I don't remember the exact questions.
Understood, and it's been a while since you filled it out. So I just want to read a few of them to you and ask you to kind of expand or explain your logic and thinking about these statements. Would that be okay?
Okay.
And again, if you ever need me to reread them or, just let me know, okay?
Okay.
The first statement is discrimination is not as bad as the media makes it out to be. And you somewhat disagreed with that notion. So can you explain why you would disagree with the notion that discrimination is not as bad as the media makes it?
Sometimes I feel like the media goes for certain stories, I guess, that would bring headlines that grabs the people's attentions. So the only discrimination that I'm aware of is what I hear or read or see on the news.
Right. Okay. And so there may be stories that sensationalize certain discriminatory acts, but you acknowledge that discrimination does occur. Is that another way of saying that?
Yes.
Because the next question is, blacks and other minorities do not receive equal treatment as whites in the criminal justice system, and you somewhat agreed with that.
I do.
Okay. You were asked to rank your opinion on the statement, police in my community make me feel safe, and you strongly agreed with that proposition.
I do, yes.
And likewise, there is a statement that reads, I do not trust the police, and you strongly disagreed with that proposition.
Correct. From my experience, I've had no issues with law enforcement.
Okay. And so you're basing that on somewhat of your personal experience with law enforcement?
Yes.
And when we talk about police, are you inclined to believe the testimony of a police officer over that of any other observer or standby or bystander citizen simply by virtue of the fact that they're a police officer?
Not necessarily.
Okay. Is there some circumstances where you would believe a police officer over a civilian witness? Just again because they're a police officer?
Not because they're a police officer, no.
Okay. But would it be fair to say that there may be areas where their training is relevant and that a bystander might not know about that training?
Correct, yes.
You were asked a couple of questions about both Black Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter, and your response to both were somewhat favorable. With respect to Black Lives Matter, you wrote, I believe they have a right to express themselves and stand up for what they say is wrong within their communities and ask for change. Can you explain, how familiar are you with Black Lives Matter, and do you participate or donate money or any of that nature?
I don't participate. I don't know a lot about their organization as a whole. I feel like their cause is to protect black lives and bring their issues to light.
Okay.
And I believe they have a right to do that.
Likewise, with respect to Blue Lives Matter, you wrote, "I support all public servants and believe they play an important role within our society." Similar kind of sentiment with respect to police officers?
I do. I feel like we need law enforcement.
Okay. And have you participated in any sort of rallies or anything, or donated any money to those types of causes?
I have not.
Now, I know that you indicated in your questionnaire that your employer or your place of employment was damaged during the looting and rioting that happened. Was that correct?
It was, yes.
Okay. And again, without identifying where you specifically work, was your employer, it's in a more suburban location?
Yes.
And based on the nature, it was sort of an opportunity. It wasn't in the middle of the 3rd precinct, in other words.
Correct.
And if we remember, there was a lot of protesting and rioting kind of centered around the 3rd and 5th precincts, but there were these various incidents that happened further away from that area, right?
Correct.
And so the place where you work was vandalized. Did you, as a result of that, did you end up losing time off of work, or did you have to take time off of work, or did it increase the amount of work you had to do?
We had to close our business a little bit longer. I believe it was 7 days.
Okay. Kind of do some repairs, get some stuff back in place, and reopen?
Correct. Find out what was taking.
Okay. Is there anything about that would have any sort of impact on your ability to be fair and impartial in this case?
It does not, because I believe that it was not due to protests. It was through the rioting, and I just believe that people took an opportunity to break in.
Okay. I have a few questions. You requested some private conversation, and I do think it's important that we have that conversation. Again, not trying to pry, but with the court's permission, I'd ask for...
Actually, if we can do a sidebar. All right, we're going to go to a true in-camera examination, which means I'm going to ask spectators to step out into the hallway just for a moment regarding this issue, and we'll go off audio as far as the broadcast, and we'll call you back in as soon as we're back on audio.
Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Dan at Unicorn Riot. Thanks for tuning in. We're waiting right now for some kind of in-camera review, I think is what they call it, essentially, where the media got removed from the courtroom and lawyers are having some kind of discussion. You can see here in the wide shot that the state prosecution is on the left side and defense attorney Nelson is in the middle there. The defendant, former MPD officer Derek Chauvin, is on the far right, and Amy Voss is in the back right of the layout right now. So we are at a point where 12 jurors have been selected, and we're trying to get through to 2 more alternates, so that'll be a total of 14 today. Thanks for tuning in. Unicorn Riot's a nonprofit media organization. We try to cover social issues, dive deep on different things, and you can check out our website, unicornriot.ninja. We are updating the Chauvin webpage, the trial webpage right now, so that's being adjusted at this moment. But that's where we're trying to have summaries of what's going on in the day-to-day. So I just wanted to take a second to clear up some confusion with the Facebook chat, and this is a complicated subject, so maybe we won't cover every nuance here, but obviously, the uprising was a huge situation in Minneapolis last summer, and aside from the police precinct being burned, there was property destruction. There, a lot of different things happened. The National Guard came in, and so forth. And I just wanted to clarify, as someone who's worked on analyzing this and sort of the lay of the land, helped produce our live coverage, although I was not reporting in the streets. I think it's important to realize that when there is unrest, that a great deal of that does come out of the community. And what we saw in the months following, especially probably a couple months ago, was definitely an effort by the local authorities, the local political figures, prosecutors and stuff, to kind of try to sort of pin the whole out. A lot of the state authorities were trying to pin the unrest on outside agitators, and the outside agitator trope is this kind of familiar concept that was very common in the civil rights movement in the 1950s to blame civil rights quote-unquote agitation on communists and outsiders and to things of that nature, and that's unrealistic. Obviously, when there's a complex event, a lot of different people come in. Like, we know that, for example, several nights into the unrest, a bunch of white teenagers from western Wisconsin got caught by local residents and turned over to their mom. Like, I believe that happened at one point, for example. So there were some outside white kids or whatever yes, that happened, but that does not explain the bulk of events, right? Like, that's not actually an analysis that is just the keystone of saying, oh, this was all created by agitators or shadowy groups on the left or the right or whatever. What if you look at our footage, because we were reporting there live, you can see from the get-go that the community was truly upset about this, and there were definitely there was stuff done to the precinct on the first day, if I recall. There were eggs thrown at it and stuff like that in the first hours of what was happening as soon as the march went over to the precinct. So it's important to take that in perspective, that it isn't all just easily assigned to outside agitators or whatever. And the government likes to get people to think that it is outside agitators because the government, the municipal authorities and stuff, they do not want to have to concede that they unraveled the social peace in the city. They do not want to have to concede that they did such a bad job of managing the social problems that that many people in the community did things like property destruction. So that's an element of spin here that needs to be addressed carefully. And, you know, when I see people say, oh, yes, you know, the riot was started by an agitator and stuff like that, that is not a realistic assessment of unrest. And it needs to be acknowledged. And you can go back and watch our videos. You know, Unicorn Riot interviewed dozens of people that were directly involved and were talking about the mechanisms of how this was happening. And so the idea that this is just mysteriously imported by outside agitators is wishful thinking by the authorities. It is a common tactic to basically try to bury how badly the authorities manage the situation and pretend that outside factors just mysteriously set everything off. So that is, in a nutshell, that is the piece of analysis which needs to be acknowledged, I think. And there's a lot more to say about that, but it is a major factor, and it's running all over the chat today, and it's clearly kind of mixed in with the jury selection conversation. So I understand why it's coming up today. But just go back and look at our footage. Go back and look at Unicorn Riot's YouTube, watch the whole footage, see those interviews with those people, or the, you know, our condensed pieces that we've been running, and you can understand that it is not just random outside agitators that are responsible for the unrest. I just had to address that because it is a serious issue that needs to be understood. Because, again, you know, we are looking at a dicey situation with the local politicians. They are stumbling into kind of a risky equation because they are ignoring how much tension is in the city, and they are trying to open the square again. So, and, you know, I'm just sort of summarizing, you know, this is my analysis here, but I've been watching this very closely, and you can take a look at our footage to understand it better. So just, again, go back to Unicorn Riot's YouTube page and take a look at the streams that we did during the uprising, and you'll see that it's not simply outside agitators. So I just want to be very blunt about that type of thing personally. So thank you. This is Dan at Unicorn Riot. I'm just trying to give you a nutshell perspective that is based on a lot of evidence. So thank you for your time on that. I just had to share that because it's all over the chat right now. So again, you know, we're waiting on jury selection. They've gone to this in-camera discussion involving this juror, and there's definitely been discussions about riot destruction and so forth. So it's all up in the mix today, you could say. So we heard earlier today that there will not be a continuance. The trial will not be delayed on the basis of a defense continuance because it's so big in the news. And we also heard that the venue will not be changed because it's been huge news all over Minnesota, all over the United States, and really the world. So the news has really been buzzing about it. So a venue change has been ruled out by the judge. And another point of little clarification there, they were talking about a 2019 video clip where George Floyd was arrested and detained, and the defense is trying to use that video to make certain claims about him, to just basically to, you know, to try to get their client off, former officer Chauvin. So that was the video, and to some limited extent that video is allowed to be reintroduced. So, but not in an entirely expansive way that the defense wanted, but in a limited way. They were talking about the 2019 video, and they were not talking about the 2020 video. I just want to mention that because there was definitely confusion about that issue as well. So, you know, again, if you want to understand, you know, why uprisings happen, to step back again to last summer, you have to, like, actually go and interview people. And you have to actually talk to people. And Unicorn Riot has tried very hard to do that. We've put a lot of resources towards that. When there's unrest, when big things are happening, we got to try to talk to people. And I think once you do that, then you can see that these simple explanations, these simple claims that an outside agitator precipitates everything, like, it just doesn't add up because there's so many people involved. It's a complex event. And yes, there are sides to it and different groups that come in and stuff like that. That is true. But again, it's like it takes a lot of direct reporting to analyze how unrest happens in the United States. So I just wanted to mention that because I do think it's important. So I'll let that go for now. And so, again, we're waiting for this slow in-camera examination. But, if you can support our work at unicornriot.ninja, that's much appreciated. Check out our website. It's right here. The link to the trial page is right up at the top. So thanks all for your support, everyone. We're just going to keep waiting on this in-camera examination to come back. Thank you. Hey, what's up? It's Dan at Unicorn Riot. I'm just going to run down some quick statistics. Okay, it looks like we might finally be coming back. Never mind. So, just to give a couple more statistical updates, 3 jurors got approved yesterday, which brought us from 9 to 12, and then they need to find another 2 alternates. So right now, it's been 8 full days of jury selection. Like the first day didn't really get to the juries, day 1 didn't. So we're at 12, and we're trying to get through to the 2 alternates. The initial jury pool was 326 people. So that's how many people got those questionnaires and are on the list. So they've gone through 95 people in the process so far. Some of them haven't been questioned in court. They've just been mutually agreed to be removed. So 95 went through. Of that, 22 got excused for cause, 16 excused by the jury office, 57 have been questioned, 12 have been selected, and 27 excused for cause by the court. Those are the stats we have right now. That may be updated. We're still double checking the number of strikes right now. It's been a little hard to track the strikes, of course, because they subtracted some strikes, or strikes got subtracted, and then the judge decided to add strikes back after the settlement news dropped earlier this week. So that's gone back and forth a little bit. So again, thanks for tuning into Unicorn Riot. We've just been waiting on this pretty slow in-camera discussion happening, and so first the defense went, and now the state prosecutor is up. So we have this graphic here, which helps illustrate who's involved. The current attorney for the government that's speaking is Stephen Schlichter. I've struggled with his name. Schlichter, I think, is roughly the correct pronunciation. And so they're debating this one juror, or debating issues involving this one juror right now. So we're just waiting to see what happens there. Thank you all for tuning in, and we really appreciate the polite chats. Thanks everyone for tuning in. We're live on YouTube, on Facebook. We have a new account on twitch.tv/unicorn_riot. If you want to support our work, it's on our website, unicornriot.ninja/donate. And we are also on Patreon. So thanks again for your support today, everyone. I really appreciate it. Also, I just wanted to mention, in terms of, evaluating the appearance or race or age of these jurors, it's worth noting that the pool reporters who sit in the two chairs in the back that are currently empty right now, the pool reporters have been seeing the jurors, and so the media center knows the general age and sort of apparent race of the jurors. So I would say that is something that, is going to be kind of verified and tends to be compiled and listed out every couple days. So I would say that that is something that will be pretty concretely known. I just wanted to mention that because, again, it's a subject of interest, right? And so we've been seeing that get up in the air. One thing is that it's not allowed to just, the defense can't just try to strike all the black jurors because they're black, for example. And so it's worth knowing that there's something called a Batson challenge that is a thing that is supposed to prevent a purely race-based jury thing to happen. Apparently there are nowadays in Hennepin County prompted to fill out their race and ethnicity at this point. So that should be known. I think we're coming back. Thank you all.
Right. All right, Mr. Nelson.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you, ma'am. Just a few follow-up questions in terms of your questionnaire. You had indicated at the beginning of our conversation that you were very interested in kind of homelessness and the homeless problem here in the Twin Cities, and wanted to be more involved in some advocacy work in that regard. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you understand that this case involves the Minneapolis Police Department and actions of the Minneapolis Police Department. I know that over the course of the last several months there have been a lot of stories about homeless encampments here in the Twin Cities being pulled apart by the Minneapolis Police Department. Do you harbor resentment against the Minneapolis Police Department for their handling of the homeless situation here in Minneapolis?
I do not.
You were asked about your ability to evaluate graphic photographs, and you wrote slightly difficult, but you feel you could do it.
I feel like I can do it.
Okay. So if you were to be exposed to various autopsy or medical pictures, you would be able to kind of get past that and examine those?
I could.
Okay. Lastly, ma'am, you were asked a series of questions about whether you want to serve as a juror on this case, and you wrote that you were not sure, and because it is a high-profile case, that comes with a lot of responsibility. You're nervous about the verdict and the reaction of the public, protesters, rioters, inciting violence, damage, and destruction all over again. So I appreciate your concerns, and we've talked a lot about that at the beginning. Describe what you see as your responsibility here in this case.
Well, based on, to be fair and impartial, based on the evidence that's presented in court, I know the public would not be privy to that information, so they might not understand everything or understand why the verdict was the way it was. I feel people have very, very strong opinions on both sides. So no matter what, I feel like not everyone's going to be happy. So.
And again, you feel you can be fair and impartial in this case?
I do.
Okay. I may have just a moment, Your Honor.
Mm-hmm.
Your Honor, we'll pass for cause.
Mr. Slusher.
Thank you, Your Honor. All right, Juror 96. Just following up on the questions relating to your work and advocacy for homelessness, can you just tell me a little bit about why you became involved in that particular effort?
I've volunteered in homeless shelters before. I would like to get more involved in being more of a solution for the affordable housing. I feel like a lot of people can't afford housing in the state of Minnesota.
So noticed, again, without naming your employer, you do some work, I guess it'd be in a customer service related industry, is that right?
I do.
Yeah. And that's full-time work?
I recently resigned from that position a week and a half ago.
Okay. Are you between jobs right now?
I am.
Okay. On the questionnaire, you indicated a strong disagreement with the statement that Minneapolis police officers are more likely to respond with force when confronting black suspects than when dealing with white suspects. Do you remember giving that response?
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about why you hold that opinion? What experiences have you seen of people and how the police have treated them?
I stated that I do not believe that.
That's right.
Right, okay.
Yep.
I have never seen it myself personally. I feel like it depends on the situation.
And how so?
Whatever situation, how the person reacts, I feel like the police need to react.
And so the treatment, the way the police treats, in your opinion, a suspect, for example, would depend on the suspect's treatment of the police officer.
Yes, it would depend on their actions.
And so, you know, some people would say if you cooperate with the police, you really would have nothing to fear in terms of police treatment of you. Would you agree with that statement?
Yes.
And conversely, if you don't cooperate with the police, then maybe you should expect to be treated more harshly. Would you agree with that statement as well?
Well, maybe different steps need to be taken.
How so?
I don't know to what extent. I don't, you know, it depends again on the individual situation. If you're asked to be in comply and you don't comply, you know, something needs to happen to resolve the situation. So I'm not sure what those additional steps would entail.
Would you go as far as to say that if you resist the police or don't cooperate with the police and you get harmed as a result, you kind of get what you have coming to you?
I don't know if I would say harmed is necessarily the correct way to put it.
How would you say it?
I don't know. You know, it depends on the situation. I don't know. If you're not listening to what the commands are, obviously something else needs to happen to resolve the situation. So I don't know how far the steps would go. It would depend on what the situation is.
What do you think you would like to know about the situation to, you know, help justify or not justify a police officer's treatment of a particular subject?
Well, you'd have to know the whole story. You know, if it's referring to this incident, I'm sure something happened before the video, before somebody started videoing the incident. I don't know what that was. So I don't know if the proper procedures were taking place or not.
And it sounds like you assume that there would be some procedures and training that an officer should be able to rely upon to know how to deal with circumstances?
I do.
Would it be important for you to know, what those policies and procedures were?
I believe so.
And whether or not they were followed?
Yes.
You indicated you agree that police in this country treat blacks and whites equally. Do you recall that response?
I do.
Can you tell me what you're basing that on?
My personal experience. I've seen incidences where the police and minorities were involved, and I didn't see them treat them any differently than anybody else.
Have you had conversations with any friends of yours who maybe have shared their experiences on how they were treated by the police versus how someone else may have been treated?
No.
Despite that, you indicated that you believe that the criminal justice system is biased against racial and ethnic minorities. You somewhat agreed with that proposition. Can you explain that answer a little bit?
I guess I base that more on an economic standpoint of view. I guess I feel like if you can hire a lawyer, you have a better chance of getting a fair trial, or versus if you can't, if you don't have the funds.
And you see that as an economic disparity, but you're relating it to a racial and ethnic disparity as well. Is that right?
In a way, I guess. Yes.
Why is that?
I just feel like, from what I've seen, like in the news, and I just feel like you have a better chance of proving your case if you have a private lawyer versus public defenders, I guess.
In a question related to the criminal justice system, you indicated that you believe the criminal justice system works most of the time, but you talked about innocent people who've been convicted of crimes they didn't commit. And you recall that response?
Sometimes, you see on the news that people have convicted and years later it comes out to be not the case.
In the response to the question regarding knowledge of the case, you indicated while being restrained, George Floyd became distressed, stating he couldn't breathe. Do you recall describing that?
Yes, that's what, from seeing the video, that's kind of what I got from the video.
Do you think that if, in your opinion, if someone actually can't breathe, would they be able to say they couldn't breathe? Yes, Your Honor. Do you have any medical knowledge or training?
I do not.
I need just to ask you a question generally. Do you have any reason to believe or disbelieve that if someone were not able to breathe, that they'd be able to speak?
I believe they could speak if they were breathing.
Could you explain that a little bit more?
Well, or I should put it this way, if you're not breathing, obviously you're not going to be able to speak.
Okay. And if you could speak, do you think that means that you can breathe?
It would depend on the circumstance. I think if you can speak somewhat, you're breathing somewhat.
Yep. If I may have a moment, Your Honor. Your Honor, we'll pass for cause.
Juror 96. You'll be on this jury. And so we're going to have you come back on March 29th. We expect it'll be 4 weeks long. We will be in touch to remind you, if nothing else, but we're pretty firm on the date. There might be other logistical things that we have to impart to you, so make sure you answer any emails or phone calls from the jury office or from the court in general. And the deputy will take some paperwork from you, but keep that letter that got you into the government center this morning.
Okay.
Okay, and bring that with you next time.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for the privacy.
You bet. Council, I think what next is a group. I'm going to do the group advisory, but then send everybody back, take a break, and I want to meet with council and chambers at the break. And if you could bring your notes for the afternoon jurors with you, that'd be good. And everybody can come back to chambers. All right, let's get our group. Let me talk to the lawyers about this. Now bring your notes, but there's also a development here that we need to talk about.
I'm one of the co-founders of the Minnesota African American Heritage Museum and Gallery. I'm also the curator for the museum, and today we created a Black Lives Matter mural right here on Plymouth Avenue, right in front of the museum, and it was a great event. We had 16 artists who were each assigned a letter. They did their own creative designs on the letters. We also had a network of volunteers who came out, and we also had the community that came out to volunteer and helped paint. So it was a beautiful event. The reason that we did the Black Lives Matter mural was in support of the movement and the protest against the killing of George Floyd and the fight against systemic racism.
You know, being here for this cause, man, it was a beautiful thing. Hopefully help some people heal a little bit and inspire people to be more spirited in their response to things that should be happening. I mean, I'm honored to be a part of it. I mean, and for me, since I was out there and about during the whole uprising, and just watching all that beautiful action, but to see people out there was inspiring for me as an old head. I was like, okay, these young folks got it, right? And so it's our job, at least I think in my head, to keep young brothers and sisters, you know, spirited.
This is protesting peacefully, you know what I mean? And if people are upset about it, then that's their problem, but this means a lot to everyone here.
It's great to see something so profound and so powerful being stated on Plymouth and Penn Avenue. Plymouth Avenue is a historical avenue where in the 60s where the riots took place in this black community. There used to be businesses up and down the street here.
We got projects like this, and it's given the artists an opportunity to speak through their visual paintings, through their poetry, through their whatever medium that they have. I think that's the plus side of it. The downside of it is that the injustice and people are losing their lives in order for this to happen. So, you know, we need this to happen without people losing their lives, without black people losing their lives.
Today was a really big day for Save the Boards to memorialize the movement because in the span of a few hours, our collection became the largest collection of plywood protest murals in the Twin Cities to date. We picked up somewhere around 200 plus boards from Whittier Alliance. Everybody please, artwork facing out.
Art wouldn't exist without the murder of Black people. And so one thing me and Lisa really have been trying to push is we need to keep them accessible for the Black community because they wouldn't exist without, you know, the murder of our people.
At the beginning, it was really interesting because all of these large organizations like MIA and the Smithsonian and a lot of other like historical museums, they thought, oh, we'll just take them off your hands, or oh, we'll start collecting them. And I think we set a precedent really early on of being like, there will be no owners who are white owned. The only museum that we'll work with is the Black owned museum, the Minnesota African American Heritage Museum and Gallery. And yeah, I think it's strange that they just assumed that they would take over the responsibility and the storytelling aspect of this moment in history, because that's what they've done historically, right? They've always taken our art, taken our history, and they've made it palatable. They've made it digestible to white audiences in their white-owned museums, but not this time. This time we decided that we were gonna tell the story. We were gonna be the ones to facilitate that conversation and to decide when and where the boards were going to be visible to our communities.
For far too long, we've talked way too much, and we want action. So the fact that the House of Representatives, the U.S. House of Representatives passed the Justice in Policing Act is a good thing, but now the Senate needs to do their job. Like the U.S. Congress, Minnesota has a Senate problem here. This morning we had two of our bills that were heard. Both of them made it to the General Registry, but they were opposed by the Republican members of the House on the Public Safety Committee. Those specific bills dealt with police not having just police-only responses to mental health calls. That one made it on the General Registry, and also the no-knock warrants. That one also made it on the general registry. Now we need movement in the Senate for these bills to pass, and we're not going to stop until we do. Minnesota Justice Coalition, which is an organization that I am the president of, has partnered with many other organizations to also advance legislation and who are like-minded in pushing for the reforms that are necessary to get justice for the families, but also to provide a level of security for our communities in moving forward, to ensure that these types of atrocities that are perpetrated by people who are sworn to protect us don't happen again.
So 2 of the 9 bills that you have been pushing with the Justice Coalition, right, have made it to the general registry, but then they're stunted by the Republican-led House of Minnesota. Is that what
the Republican-led Senate. The Republican House is kind of setting the stage for the Senate.
Okay.
I think it's important to know that we know politics. And we understand, we see the games when they come. We understand that there's an election coming up, and we understand that people are trying to position themselves to go up against individuals based on this policy. However, I've also heard GOP members also talk about, some GOP members talk about that there needs to be a system of accountability, transparency, and justice as well. But leadership in those respective houses are putting their I want to say their boot on their necks, so they don't come forward and do the right thing. But time is now. We need to do the right thing.
Interesting. So thank you for that update. So we talked to you Monday, and you said if these bills don't get heard soon, they will have to get heard in 2022.
Yes.
So is that what it's looking like for all 9 of them, or do we still have some time? What's that about?
We were able to get the statute of limitations bill to the general registry as well. We do have some movement on qualified immunity. And there's some movement on some other bills, but today is the deadline. And that's why those 2 bills were heard today. Okay. The only other way to get those bills across the finish line in the House is to attach the bills and make an amendment to another bill. That's how we get passed today. So otherwise, going forward in 2022, the agenda that we have, we still have the same agenda, but we also have a supplement that includes additional bills in addition to the 9 bills that we've already brought forward. Now, we're willing to work with the Senate Republicans. We're willing to work with the House of Representatives. We're willing to work with the governor's office as a coalition to wrap our arms around it and help educate and really try to make the change that we need here in the state of Minnesota. But we just don't need to talk about it. We need to see movement in the governor's revised budget that he's put forward, and we also need to see movement and a commitment to this progress and these bills here in the state of Minnesota. So I will also say that as part of the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act in the U.S. That was passed by the U.S. House of Representatives, there's funding for states who adopt some of those policies that are in that bill. So there's potential dollars for the state of Minnesota if they get on board with what the Congress is doing now.
Interesting. So. You talked about Republicans sort of stunting the bills here in Minnesota, and we have Minneapolis, a very Democratic city, St. Paul, a very Democratic city, and they're Democratic led from the top to the bottom, it seems. And so it seems like Democrats are for these bills in the House, or excuse me, within the elected officials out at the state capitol, right? What do you think is the disconnect? Maybe if those elected officials are Democrats in the Capitol and they're for these bills, and these bills are hard to even have accountability in the cities themselves of Minneapolis, St. Paul. St. Paul has the biggest police killings. Data shows they've killed the most people, and people have not got any justice in St. Paul. Where do you think the disconnect is there?
I do think that politics play a role in this. I also think that the police federations and the unions, they've had unfettered access to our politicians for years. Not only have they had unfettered access to the years, they have virtually unlimited budget to pay for these things, and a lot of elected leaders are scared to stand up to them. And we're in this fight, and we've been in this fight for a long time. We were talking about criminal justice reform 15 years ago when it was a dirty word, and you couldn't get no progress. You had to go, if you wanted to talk about it, it was behind a closed door. And now we're starting people are starting to warm up, but we still have that problem with the police federation, unlimited resources, going this he versus us, them versus us, and really that's what it is. We need change. They need to stand up and do the right thing, and they need to understand that the community will be behind them if they do the right thing. Instead of individuals who don't have a say in a vote for you, and who work in your cities and then go back to their cities where they come from, and they can't vote for you. We're the ones who will vote for you. We're the ones who will support you, and it begs the question why you do not want to support initiatives that your people, your community are bringing forward, because the bills that we have put forward are bills that the people want. That they come from the stories from within your community. That's how a lot of this legislation was drafted, and it only makes sense to do what's right.
Thank you, John. So let's give you a bit of space to say who you are, what organizations you represent or work with, and then your website, how people can find out about the Justice Coalition or
Minnesota Justice Coalition.
And also, you've been working with a lot of these families, which everything you just said at the end is exactly where it's coming from. You've been working with these families, hearing the family stories for how long? At least last summer, years and 15 years, you say. And so it seems to be the start is warming up, and these bills are coming from the right place, in my opinion, from watching you do work in the backstages of what you're doing, talking to the families, being with the families. And so, do you want to just give our audience or whoever's watching, who are you and how can people find out more?
Right. My name is Jonathan McClellan, and I am the president of the Minnesota Justice Coalition. The URL is www.themjc.org. We work with other organizations such as Family Supporting Families Against Police Violence, Communities United Against Police Brutality, the Racial Justice Network, the Disability Justice Network, TCC for J, and the Minnesota Disability Justice Network. Like I said that. Yeah. So cool. Yeah. So and we're a collective over. When we all put our heads together, it was because we started seeing us duplicating a lot of the things that we were all doing, and we put our heads together and said, let's all come together so we can sit over here and maximize what it is that we're doing, and maximize our resources to sit over here and push what needs to be pushed and work on what needs to be worked on. So when you have the protests over here, you have the policy over there, and then you have the politics over there. These are all three pieces that are very important and critical to making change. We have to remember that when Martin Luther King marched, that he just didn't march. He also worked with the policy and the legislation and the president's office to try to get that legislation passed, such as the 1964 Civil Rights Act, the 1965 Voting Rights Act, that helped change our country. And now we find ourselves in this place again where we have to, that the real change, the lasting change, it's going to come from policy, and the policy happens at the Capitol, and that's where we need to be. So we have to. Everything matters. Everything that we do, the protests matter, the policy matters, the politics matters. And that's where we are. That these are the spaces that we operate in, and we are very effective at what we do.
Word. Thank you for all that. Is there anything else you'd want to say in what you saw today with this press conference? Any of the bills you're working on? Anything else? My heart goes out to the George Floyd family and the community on 38th and Chicago. We have to do better, and we have to change that community for the better. I don't want us to go back to what it was before. I want it to be better, and I look forward to the memorial there that they're talking about building and investing in.
Hey everyone, what's up? This is Dan at Unicorn Riot. Thanks so much for tuning in. We are waiting for court to come back. Essentially, the judge said there was some kind of development and then suddenly left, even though moments earlier he had said they were going to read their kind of introductory spiel to a new group of jurors, and then that just didn't happen, and they just suddenly took off. So we don't know what kind of timing we're on right now, which is, we're waiting for it. But yeah, this is the live feed from the courtroom. This is the, live video that's distributed to the media. So we don't know what the development is. One thing I did see overnight was folks had added little padlocks to some of the fences with names of people that have been killed by police violence that had been placed on some fences nearby that have been put up around the trial. So yeah, so we're just waiting here because we don't know how long they're going to be away. Again, I'll mention Unicorn Riot's a 501c3 nonprofit media organization. We really appreciate your support. Check out our website, unicornriot.ninja, for all the different issues we cover, whether it's Line 3 or the far right and Discord leaks or other stories, how people's struggles to get housing in places like Denver. We also cover international stories. One of our members reports from South Africa. We've also had, contributed stories from Brazil and things like that. So we really try to have an interesting variety of stories coming through our platform, and we've been working with more writers to pull contributions into the platform as well, which has been really cool. So that's, just take a look at our website if you're interested in any of that stuff. So today, what we saw was the first alternate get on just before this break. So that's essentially number 13. So we're really only missing one more at number 14. So I think we're coming probably close to the end of the jury selection process. It's already been 8 full days of jury selection, and then the first day 1, was really about motions, and they didn't really work on actually selecting the jury. So yeah, we're at 13 right now. We're trying to track down the number of strikes at the moment. It's been a little hard to track the strikes. Even the judge was confused about how many strikes the state had. I think that was yesterday. So it's the strikes. They should just put up a big scoreboard in the courtroom to keep it clear. That would be one way to keep it straight. So besides that, the big finding today was about the motions that the defense had made to try to get the venue changed. And so the venue is not going to be changed, the judge ruled, because this case has already had tons of publicity all over the state, the country, the world. So moving it wouldn't make a difference in that sense, the judge seemed to acknowledge. Also, a continuance, which would be basically a pause to kind of wait for that pretrial publicity to die down, also got denied because, again, this has gotten so much attention. So that was another thing that came up. And if you folks have any questions, I can try to field them while we're waiting here for a minute. Otherwise, I'll just let it wait. So I'm hearing from that it's possible that the attorneys are coming back. I'm not sure. Well, we'll see. We'll see. The other thing was that, which was a little confusing because some folks watching were not sure what they were referring to, but they were talking about the George Floyd got arrested in some other incident in 2019, and the defense is definitely trying to use the 2019 incident as much as possible, and the judge seems to be allowing some narrow things from the 2019 incident and not as much as the defense wanted. So it seemed for the most part that today's decisions were mostly not favoring the defense, but not 100%. That would be just a quick interpretation of what happened with those. So let's see. I can try to field any other questions if folks want to throw them on the chat quick. And yeah, so people are saying that Court TV reported that the number 13 juror alternate was a white female. So that is apparently what Court TV said. We are hearing that the court is expected to come back at 10:45 based on notes from the journalists. So let me share what we're hearing through the media system. 1 second. Thank you. Again, we appreciate all your support today. It's been really nice to see that, you know, we're all trying to learn and people are mostly being respectful in the chats, and that's all great. So we've been streaming live on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitch, and on Patreon, and we really appreciate everyone's support on that. So this is what we have from the notes, is that the clerk, so what appears to have happened is that that Judge Cahill asked the clerk to bring in the next panel. The clerk came back into the courtroom, tells Cahill something that prompts him to ask the parties to join him in his chambers. The attorneys followed Cahill back. Chauvin remains seated at the defense table. His yellow notepad is upside down on the table. He sits quietly, staring straight forward, appears to be wringing his hands, and that the word there is that the break will last until 10:45 Central, which should be any minute now. So I'm going to leave the feed open. Let's see. I'm just going to see if we have any questions. You know, thanks again for all the support, folks, in the chats. It is really appreciated. Everyone in Unicorn Riots worked really hard on this, so I just want to thank Nico, D, Alex, Georgia, Chris, just everyone's been working really hard on it. So one question is from the chats: do we know anything more about the FBI and ATF in South Minneapolis? And the thing there was, like, again, in one of these kind of ominous press conferences that the city had, that the federal forces are supposedly going to be mobilized, and obviously that's definitely a subject of concern. So so far we have not seen anything in writing about it, but we did see that in the city press conferences that activating federal forces and bringing in the U.S. attorney is something that is definitely being put forward by city officials. So we are expecting, hopefully, to find out more about that. But yes, definitely something is going on with federal agents. It's being discussed at press conferences. I just want to mention that. So our understanding right now is that this person that was just picked today, and then one more person will be alternates. So our understanding right now is that the last people are the alternates. But if that changes, we will let you know. We're getting another question. Has anyone heard about the George Floyd Square and if and when they would try to shut it down? The understanding that the city gave out earlier is that the square would be left alone until this trial was completed. That was what the city officials communicated weeks and weeks and weeks ago. But suddenly, in more recent press conferences, they have declared that is no longer the case. So it is possible that they will try to get control of the square area and quote-unquote reopen it, that they would not wait for the end of the trial. That is what they are now communicating. That is the latest from the city officials in those press conferences. To another question in the chat, will we going live feed outside the court as well? We have done some live feeds outside the court based on capacity. The judge is back. We'll cut it back. Thank you, everyone.
Just for the record, we did have a chance to meet in chambers to discuss some of our upcoming jurors. And we have agreed by stipulation of the parties, numbers 101, 106, and 107 will be excused for cause. Juror number 102 was excused last night by the jury office. That person is no longer a Hennepin County resident and is thus ineligible. That leaves us 3 people, 2 that will do the group advisory and instructions and try and get through them before lunch. But as is often our habit, maybe continued after lunch for one. But in any case, since we would only have one on for the afternoon, jury office is trying to contact an additional 2 jurors to be essentially on standby to come in if they are able. They were not told last night that that this was their day to come in, so it's more of a see if it's possible so that we can fill up our afternoon if necessary. So, and we don't know the answer to that. I'll advise counsel as soon as possible. So with that, if we can bring in the next group of jurors. That's what I thought. Seat anywhere? And you can be seated. Good morning. First of all, can you hear me? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Excellent. We have hearing assistance devices if you could not hear me. So, in any case, my name is Pete Cahill, and I'm one of the judges of the district court, and you have been summoned as potential jurors in the case of State of Minnesota versus Derek Chauvin, which is a criminal case related to the death of George Floyd on May 25th, 2020. A person charged with a crime has a right to a fair trial before an impartial judge and an impartial jury. In order to make sure the jurors who are selected are impartial, the law provides that the court and the attorneys for the parties may ask questions to the jurors Those questions must be answered under oath. Now first, thank you for filling out the questionnaire and mailing it back to us. That gives us a lot of good information to start this jury selection process. Your contribution to the important and serious matter at hand is best served by continuing to provide full and complete answers to the questions that you'll be asked today. Those questions will follow up on issues from the questionnaire and possibly other topics. Now, after the questioning is over, the attorneys will have the right to excuse some of you from service on this jury, and I may excuse others for cause. In either case, it does not mean that you are not a fair and impartial person, and so I ask that you not take any offense in being excused. Also ask that you not take any offense in any question that you may be asked. We must pry to some extent in order to explore some opinions you might hold and hear about experiences that you have had that might affect your ability to serve in this case. The defendant, Mr. Chauvin, has been charged with murder in the second degree and manslaughter in the second degree. Now, in the normal course of a trial, charges might be added or subtracted from those charges, but those are the charges as it stands today. To the charges, the defendant has entered a plea of not guilty, which is a denial of each and every material allegation in the charges. I'm now going to have the participants in the case introduce themselves in order so that we can find out if you have any kind of relationship with them, a friendship, acquaintance, or a professional relationship. First, for the state.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Steve Swisher and I represent the state of Minnesota.
Hello, my name is Christina Marinakis and I'm assisting with the prosecution. Good morning. Erin Eldridge for the state of Minnesota.
And Mr. Nelson, if you'd introduce your client.
Good morning. My name is Eric Nelson. Along with co-counsel Amy Ross, we represent the defendant.
Do either of our jurors know anybody in the room? If so, raise your hand. Okay. Anyone in the room know anybody who works for the Minnesota Attorney General's office? Because there might be other attorneys who might be appearing in the trial itself, including Assistant Attorney General Matthew Frank, Attorney General Keith Ellison, Mr. Jerry Blackwell, or anybody else in the Attorney General's office that anyone recognizes. Okay. Now, you've been given a copy, excuse me, you have been given a copy of a list of potential witnesses. Please review it before you are questioned individually if you have not done so already. You'll be asked if you know anybody on that list. Now, one of the things the attorneys may not do in jury selection is to instruct you on the law. But I do want you to be aware of some of the basic concepts that apply in every criminal case, so that you may keep them in mind as you answer the court's and the attorney's questions. So I will instruct you as follows. First, the charges against the defendant are not evidence and they create no inference of guilt. No member of the jury should in any way permit himself or herself to be prejudiced against the defendant because a charge has been made against him or because he has been placed on trial. The defendant is presumed innocent of the charges made against him, and in order for you to find the defendant guilty, the state must prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The defendant does not have to prove his innocence. The presumption of innocence remains with the defendant throughout the trial unless and until he has been proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt according to the law and the evidence admitted at trial. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt is such proof as ordinarily prudent men and women would act upon in their most important affairs. A reasonable doubt is a doubt based upon reason and common sense. It does not mean a fanciful or capricious doubt, nor does it mean beyond all possibility of doubt. If you serve on this jury, you and your fellow jurors will be the sole judges of whether a witness is to be believed and of the weight to be given a witness's testimony. There are no hard and fast rules to guide you in this respect, but in determining believability and weight of testimony, jurors may take into consideration the witness's interest or lack of interest in the outcome of the case, their relationship to the parties, their ability and opportunity to know, remember, and relate the facts, their manner, their age and experience, their frankness and sincerity or the lack thereof, the reasonableness or the unreasonableness of their testimony in light of all the other evidence in the case, and any other factors that bear on believability and weight. If on this jury you should in the last analysis rely upon your own experience, good judgment, and common sense. Now, there are certain things you should not do during jury selection. You are not investigators. You are not to go out to do any looking, and you are not to speak to anyone about this matter. You are not to use the internet to look for information about this case or about the law. Above all, you must not talk to anyone who is involved, the lawyers or the witnesses. Do not be offended if the attorneys, parties, witnesses, or spectators do not speak to you. They know it would be improper to contact you during the trial, and so they will, except for the normal jury selection process, and they will confine themselves to a brief greeting. Now, during the selection process, your family and friends will be curious as to what you are doing. You may tell them that you are on a panel of potential jurors in a criminal case, and that is all you should tell them. Since that is all you should tell family and friends, that is all you should tell the general public. So, please, during these proceedings, refrain from using Facebook, Twitter, or other social media to announce that you are a potential juror or to comment on this trial. You may access such social media tools, except for the news feeds that you might have, but please do not publish any information about the case or your thoughts about the case. You do not have to stay away from people and refuse to speak to them. Do whatever you wish, but do not talk about the case and do not talk at all to anyone involved in it. Because of the nature of the charges, this case is receiving media coverage. Do not read about this case in the newspapers or online. Do not listen to news about it on radio or television, for that matter, in any media. This trial, including jury selection, is being televised, but no video of you or any other juror will be taken at any time, now or during trial if you are selected. Also, your name will not be used in the courtroom. You will only be referred to by your random number to protect your privacy. The audio of anything you say will be broadcast unless we need to discuss something that is deeply personal, extremely sensitive, or embarrassing, or likely to specifically identify you. In those cases, I will specifically order that the audio not be broadcast. In that case, you will still have to answer questions on the record, but without audio or video broadcast outside this courtroom. Now, juror number 99, if you could remain, and we'll start with individual questioning with you. Juror number 103, if you could follow the deputy back to the other courtroom. Okay, juror number 99, if you could come on up to the seat here. Good morning.
Good morning.
Before we start, a couple things. I'm going to swear you in so that all your answers are under oath. If you could raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully answer all questions about your qualifications to serve as a juror?
Yes.
All right. Will you have plexiglass in front of you? We have plexiglass between us. I'll continue to wear a mask. Attorneys also have plexiglass in front of them. We have a lot of precautions which will permit you, if you wish, to take off your mask. Whether you wear it or not is totally up to you. But in either case, mask on or mask off, if you could make sure you're close enough to the microphone so that we can hear you clearly. First of all, thank you for filling out that questionnaire. It was very helpful to get us good information to start with. Was everything true on the questionnaire?
Yes.
Any changes or additions to the questionnaire?
No.
All right. When the lawyers are asking you questions, they might focus on specific questions. And since it was a few months ago, they'll probably read you the question and your answer. Not to be confrontational, but just to refresh your memory about what you said. Because it's been a few months, we find that people want to add things that they forgot to put in there, or correct things that were inaccurate, or even maybe an opinion has changed or evolved. And so the bottom line being, we'd like you to feel comfortable giving an answer that's different from the questionnaire. The only requirement, of course, is that it be truthful and honest. But feel free for it to be different from what's in the questionnaire. You weren't supposed to read any articles or watch any media about this case, but we understand it's been a couple months since you filled out the questionnaire. And given the amount of coverage of this case, you inadvertently might have been exposed to some news, either about this case or related cases, pretrial matters, anything that you can recall that you've been exposed to in the meantime, between the questionnaire and today.
Yes, the settlement.
Okay, what do you recall of the settlement?
I just saw, on the news, the $27 million settlement that the Floyd family got.
Okay. And how do you think that would affect your decision here? If at all?
Not at all.
Okay, and let me be a little more specific. Question 10 in part 1 was basically, can you be fair and impartial? And at the time you filled out your questionnaire, your answer is yes. Do you think hearing news of that settlement may have moved the needle, so to speak, moved you a little off being impartial at all?
I would think I'm more partial now.
Okay, and to which direction?
Of the case?
Yeah.
I would think he's not guilty.
Okay, from the settlement? Okay. So if you're in the middle, that might push you the other way?
Mm-hmm.
Towards not guilty?
Correct.
Okay. I do note that you've got in your background, you've worked with the police department at South Lake Minnetonka or something out in the western suburbs. I can't recall exactly which one. Do you think that relationship, having worked there, and obviously it gave you favorable opinions about the police, do you think that would also kind of maybe move the needle a little bit?
Yeah.
So I'm sure it was an honest answer at the time you filled out the questionnaire. Now as you sit here today, do you think you can be fair and impartial?
I don't think it, I already have my opinion on it. I think it's...
And is it pretty well entrenched about it?
Yeah, I want to see, the facts and evidence. I think there's a lot out there that we don't know, and the media puts out a lot of information that, so I'm pretty sure I'm partial.
Okay, and it would be hard for you to put aside the opinions you have. All right, I'm going to excuse you from this panel and from jury service actually completely. You don't have to worry about being called back on another case. All right, thank you. Juror 103. Can I have a seat up here? Good morning.
Good morning.
You are Juror 103, is that correct?
103.
All right. Before I turn the questioning over to the attorneys, a couple of matters. First of all, I'm going to swear you in so that all your answers are under oath. So if you could raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully answer all questions about your qualifications to serve as a juror?
I do.
Okay, thank you. Now we have plexiglass between us. I have also plexiglass in front of you and in front of the attorneys. I'll continue to wear a mask. The bottom line being, you can remove your mask if you would prefer, either for comfort or to be heard more clearly. That would work just fine.
Okay.
If you feel you want to put it back on at any time, nobody would be insulted by that, so feel free to do that as you feel appropriate. As regards the questionnaire, thank you for filling out the questionnaire. Gave us a lot of good information to start, and we appreciate you taking the time to do that. First of all, was anything true on the questionnaire?
Yeah, it's all true.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and the reason we ask is because sometimes when a couple months have passed, some of the information you might, on reflection, realize, that wasn't quite accurate, I should probably add this, or something may be inaccurate, I need to change that.
Yeah, so something has occurred, and it may be an answer to one of the follow-up questions, but I have my own company, business that I'm building, and we did get commitment for investment, so now I'm accountable to do the work.
Okay.
So that sort of ties me up relative to when I had filled out that form.
Okay, is that the government grant you were talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's not government grant, it's private investment.
Okay. Tell me about the commitment. Is it time sensitive, and is it full time? What's the essential commitment there?
Yeah, it's at least half time to full time, and the clock starts. There's interest rates involved, and so we have to kind of accomplish what we have planned.
Okay. Is there a deadline to get everything done?
Yeah, there's a plan where there's deliverables at milestones, which have dates associated with them.
And is there a financial penalty if you don't make it?
Yeah, there's financial penalty. Yeah.
And you're, without saying what company you work for or the nature of it, is it just you, or do you have a small firm, large firm?
I'm the primary person, so I'm one of the. It won't make much progress if I'm not there.
All right. So there are certain things you cannot delegate on this, is what I'm hearing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think you could realistically sit through for March 29th for 4 weeks and give this case your full attention?
I think it'll be very difficult to do that.
Okay, and tell me a little bit more about that. Like, would you be trying to work full-time after jury duty, or?
Yeah, and coordinating with the rest of the team becomes more difficult. So we expect the case to be for 1 month?
Yes.
Or more?
Possibly more. As you've already seen, we occasionally run into delays or things going longer than we thought.
I think it'll be tight. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me go back to something else that's in your questionnaire. One of the questions is, can you remain fair and impartial? It's part 1, question 10. And your answer was, I can try. And we appreciate people's willingness to try. The question becomes, can you really do that? Do you think you can? Because we hate to put you into the binary situation of yes or no. I can try is an honest answer, but unfortunately we have to press you. And given the type of case we have, do you think you can, or do you think there's a significant enough danger that this is not the case for you to sit on?
I know I had a very strong emotional reaction to observing that video.
Okay.
So I don't know if that is prejudice or not.
Well, and let me follow up a little bit. One of the things, everybody has heard and seen things about this case. And we not only request, but we require that if you're on the jury, you have to put it aside, your feelings, opinions you may have formed, and decide this case objectively just on the facts, the evidence you hear in court, and put aside everything you've heard. Some of it you might actually be, you might actually see in court, but we don't know that because we don't know what all exactly you've seen. Do you realistically believe that you could dispassionately put all that aside and decide the case without being partial one way or the other?
I don't know.
Okay. You stated it was kind of an emotional reaction, which, and I'm not trying to embarrass you. You seem to be getting a little emotional.
No, it's okay. Yeah.
And as a juror, we hope that you can remain objective and kind of keep an emotional distance and be objective about it. I think given your area of expertise, you understand the need for expertise or for objectivity. Could you do that? And let me say one more thing. We put you in a tough position because you don't know exactly what all you're going to see. I mean, the questionnaire did ask you about, you know, graphic photographs and video, and if your reaction is such that you cannot put it aside, that's fine. We all come in here with different situations in our life, and so it's not a failure to say if you can't. But it's also not a failure if you say, yeah, no, I can do it. I not only will try, but I can do it. So where do you think? And you can tell me whatever you want on that topic.
I just think this case is so I can't say with confidence that I'll be able to. I think this case just is, you know, there's so many factors that played into it, and it was so close to home, like where we live and all, that I just feel like I don't want to be associated with it. It's just
is it too much?
Yeah, it's yeah, I think it's too much. Yeah, it's yeah, this is my first time in jury duty ever.
Okay.
And, yeah.
No, I absolutely understand. Mr. Nelson or Mr. Slisher, do you have any questions? All right.
Okay.
I'm going to excuse you from this
Thank you.
case. Thank you, though, for coming in and being honest about where we're at. Okay?
No problem.
Would you tell Pam that we definitely want for all three if we can? All right. I don't think we have an answer from the jury office, but we're going to try and get 3 in for this afternoon if possible.
We've got 1:10.
Oh, 1:10?
1:10 is coming.
Okay. So let's come back at 1:30 if we've got one at 1:10. Or juror number 110 will be here at 1 o'clock?
And 1:09.
Okay. We've got both?
So we have 2 right now.
Okay, so we've added one. We have 109 and 110. And we're trying for the next one. I don't know if that's, is that 111 or 112? 111. 111? Okay. We're working on 111. We'll have at least 2 for this afternoon, but they won't be here till 1. So let's reconvene at 1:15.
History in the making. This is only the beginning, okay? Only the beginning. It's like we're going here.
Oh, y'all embarrassing the whole nation. Why you should have went? You should have went and locked your boy up. You should have locked him up. You should have locked him up. Why you didn't lock him up? Why you didn't lock him up? If you fire him, you know he should be in jail. You know that. You know that. Y'all know you don't train nobody like that, man.
What I witnessed third day and the third night was people that were continuing their sort of besiegement of the precinct. It never let up. From the first 2-3 days, it never let up. When I went home, there was people still in the streets. There were still people surrounding the precinct.
Unicorn out here again. The precinct's on fire tonight. The people ain't gonna go for it, man. We done. We wanted to try to bring the peace. We ain't being peaceful, man.
Honestly, I really think the system is really just built against black people, man. Like this. Like, because you don't really see them doing this shit to white people all the time. This shit's crazy.
The police never communicated with any of the crowd. They never gave dispersal orders to any of the crowd. The police just fired on the crowd. All right, they're just getting pepper sprayed. You see their barricades are like tore down. People almost managed to breach the 3rd precinct earlier. Ah, shit! Police The spatial situation of the 3rd precinct lays out in a way where there's huge parking lots, and those huge parking lots ended up becoming like communication zones. It looks like they have a medical tent up there. They have some supplies. They have a lot going on up here. The community is looking out for itself up here. The community is helping itself in every which way. It's amazing to see. Wow, the lasers totally stopped this police from firing. And then the other officer was like, no, 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 stop. Look at the people with the laser. Those lasers are very effective on these shooters. I've seen multiple times different lasers get shown at a shooter and they've stopped shooting because they lose their sight. That's tear gas, that first one. They're putting buckets and cones on it. Shit. This is a genuine uprising. This is thousands of people. Like the whole parking lot. There's fires in it, there's parties in it, there's people seeking justice. There's hundreds of people out here on these streets. There's thousands back here. God damn. All these tear gas are being shot because of people that sort of breached the side a little bit.
I want everybody to be safe out here. Make sure y'all are protected. Y'all got masks, goggles, because it's getting real out here.
Prosecuting those 4 officers, that's justice to me right now.
Right.
Yeah, hopefully that happens pretty quick. Hey, Mayor Fry, take a word, man. We hurting out here.
You know, there's a lot of hurt, there's a lot of destruction, there's a lot of anger in the air, you know, and you can definitely feel it. It's unfortunate that it had to come to this. But, you know, when you have injustice taking place on this, you know, the scale that it is, it's about time, you know, it's just a matter of time before this explodes and, you know, the powder keg gets ignited, so.
We had gone down to Target area and we're interviewing people. One of them specifically was saying, as some fires were burning, that they were hoping, as they were a Southside resident their whole life, they were hoping that that wasn't in vain. They had told us a story about how forest fires will be created, but then it's a beautiful new growth that happens after them. They compared that to what they hope they saw after this.
If properties and things have to burn down for new things to rebuild, then that's what it is. And it's sad because right now people don't have a job to go to. People don't have access to groceries. People don't have access to the normal things that they would go and buy at these stores. I went to MTS. This is MTS right here. Fucked up. Them kids cannot go to school. I went to that fucking school. But you know what? Things have to happen sometimes for change. Sometimes it has to get worse before it gets better. This is history. None of us has seen this in our lifetime. And we're gonna remember this for the rest of our lives, and I hope to God that my city doesn't burn in vain.
It was actually an incredible interview that then led into maybe about 20 minutes later, us actually me actually realizing that the police had left from the 3rd precinct. What we saw in the videos of them leaving was the police leaving really abruptly and quickly in some transport vehicles and shooting a lot of maybe their less lethals that they had at that spot back at the crowd as they left.
What's up?
Well, everybody was chanting and everything like that, and then all of a sudden I could see the cops going into their vehicles and stuff like that, and the next thing I know, everybody was just, just chasing after them.
Immediately after that, the crowd filed in to the whole area around the precinct. This is the precinct right here, the people that breached. People are breaking all the windows. People are in the parking lot area, burning the tippy, the spy cams. I think people that breached into the precinct. Wow. Wow. People breached the precinct. There was a lot of different thoughts as to when people were starting to go into the precinct. What smoke was coming out? Was it tear gas? Was it the police shooting at people? Were they inside still? So it was really tense moments out there. We ended up going into the precinct. Before we went in, we saw people coming out with like riot shields, with a riot helmet specifically. People that came out with belts, with handcuffs on them. Once we got into the precinct, we noticed that there was a few moments where people were like running out and they thought it was tear gas that was getting shot in, but it wasn't. It was just smoke because people were setting fires to a whole bunch of different rooms. This is the 3rd precinct. There's a fire started. And the sprinklers are coming on in that room. This is the 3rd precinct right here. It has got ran through. Fires are starting in multiple rooms. The 3rd precinct. The precinct where the officers were employed. Again, this is for George Floyd, murdered by Minneapolis police officers from the 3rd precinct. This is what they were drinking on their breaks. It's like bullets burning up. When we went in there the first time, we think that there was a pack of like bullets that was on fire because I heard the bullets pow, 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 pow as they were exploding. That's when I scurried out. There's 2 rooms in there already set on fire. People are going in to set more on fire. The 3rd precinct in Minneapolis is about to be lit on fire. The rage is palpable and physically seen and felt. People are now going through some of the equipment that they're finding.
You saw a lot of people who were actually very joyous. Ton of youth. I didn't really see many elders there at all. Tons of youth and a lot of people claiming they're from the South Side, claiming that this is how South Side does it.
Yes, sir! Yes,
A lot of people just continually saying fuck 12 and fuck the police, and this is what they get, and burn it all to the ground. And those were some of the similar things that we continue to hear. We ended up going back in there a little bit later and saw a little bit more of the damage, and it was just a ton of water on the ground, just flooding out. And people were on the second, third floors, people were in the basement, and by the time we got in there, like I said, there was tons of fires already set. But the sprinkler system was incredible, and so the sprinkler system was setting out every fire that was getting lit. People were continually trying and trying and trying.
Upstairs.
People came out with a Minneapolis police jacket and burnt that on the side of the parking lot. And so people were joyous when that was burning. It was very interesting at that moment where I was filming. You could see Target in the background. You could see fireworks being lit off as people were celebrating the precinct being taken down, and people were burning a Minneapolis Police Department jacket right there. And so people were cheering that on.
Looks like that is a Minneapolis police officer's shirt, jacket.
Let's go! Yeah! Fuck 12! Yeah! Let's go! Big fire!
We serious out here. We mad as hell. And this shit ain't gonna stop. Motherfuckers gonna be out here all night and in the morning. And I'm gonna be here with them. So it ain't stopping. They gonna have to stop us though.
Talk about how it is to be a youth right now. Seeing all these people that are also youth as well.
Shit, we all just coming together and doing what we supposed to do. They hurt dudes, so we gotta do this. We gotta show them we ain't going for that no more. You know what I'm saying?
This is what democracy looks like, ladies and gentlemen. This is what happens when you get fed up with the fucking democracy that we've been given. ACAB, all cops are fucking bastards.
Buildings will get rebuilt. You cannot rebuild a dead life.